Mara took a chair with her back to the broad window, sank down and withdrew deep into herself. Before she used the last of Vergere's miraculous healing dose, she'd better know what she was up against. She was determined to do whatever she could on her own. She and Silgal had experimented with self-examination techniques, the only possible way to deal with a disease that continually mutated. Focusing the force finely, she confirmed that the odd sense focused deep in her uterus, on one side. It was a thickening of cells, almost like a tumor, multiplying more quickly than her normal cells. She probed deeper for their cellular essence. Shifting her grip on the force, she poised to destroy their blood flow. Then she sensed something weirdly familiar. Besides the tumor-like echo of her own cellular essence, completely familiar after fighting her disease for this long, she sensed another human life signature. It was Luke's, by all the star dragons ever spawned. That could mean only one thing. Mara's eyes flew open. Her arms and legs stiffened. Pregnant? This couldn't have happened. She'd taken all precautions. Her bizarre disease had transformed molecules and cells and attacked discrete organs. It could be death or disfigurement or some other unimaginable horror to an unborn child. She clenched a fist. What could she do? There were medical options. Like a Garou bear defending her cub, she attacked that thought instantly. She would let no medical aid harm her child. Again, her own thoughts caught her up. Her child? Did she carry her posterity? Or her death inside her? The tall front door slid open. Luke plunged through, and before he even got close, she felt his mind trying to grab her, protect her. "What's wrong?" he demanded. "Mara, what is it? Do you always think you have to rush in and save someone?" she asked, making a vain stab at sounding wry and superior. But her voice shook. Luke dropped to his knees beside her chair. He seized her hand. "Mara, what is it?" "The disease." She took his hand. She laid it over her abdomen. "Feel this," she said softly. "Use the force and tell me what has happened." He arched his eyebrows and frowned up at her. "Don't argue," she said. Just do it. I want an unbiased second opinion." She watched his eyes. They narrowed, and the line of his eyebrows softened. He was preparing to comfort her, to do whatever he must. Then his eyes widened, sending a sudden blue flash up at her face. "This wasn't my idea." Mara swallowed on a dry throat. "It's already in terrible danger. The disease could attack it, cause mutations." "Mara," he interrupted. He seized her hand. "Mara, anything could kill any one of us. Today, tomorrow. The Yuuzhan Vong could pull down one of Coruscant's moons, or we could fall out a window." She nodded silently, struck once again by Luke's unwavering faith in goodness and his hope in the light. He shifted his hand slightly, shaking his head in plain disbelief. "Life is risk," he murmured. "I don't feel anything dangerous about this." "Not yet," Mara whispered. "But this wasn't supposed to happen." "I know," he said. His hand shifted again. His eyes fell shut. She felt his desperate concern. Softening a little, Mara laid her free hand over his on her stomach. Finally, she dared to envision actually holding a child, looking into a face that was part Luke and part Mara, just as her niece and nephews were part Leia and part Han, but completely themselves. She'd pictured it many times as an abstraction. Then she pictured the monster her disease could make of a defenseless cluster of cells. Defenseless? Not so long as I've got custody. Something deep inside her mind was shrieking, terrorized. Something else was dancing wildly, utterly and joyously abandoning itself to hope, to joy, to a new and total commitment. Luke spoke softly. "Maybe Vergere's medicine made you vulnerable to the Force as an agent of life." She straightened her shoulders. "You want this. You're glad," she accused him. "Until this moment," her husband said, "I had no idea how badly I did want it. I was prepared to be stoic and give up hope. For my sake," he raised his chin, and she felt a wordless caress. She twisted her mouth sideways. "For two people who know each other so well, somehow we missed something." "No," he said, "something just changed. In me, maybe. Maybe you. Maybe in the Force itself. All I know is, this is the right risk to take. And that, he concluded, shaking his head, makes me happy. He looked up again, wearing a foolish grin she hadn't seen in months. It could make me very happy, actually. Mara balled her fists. Listen, Skywalker, nobody finds out about this. Nobody. Still kneeling beside her chair, he slid his hands around her waist. I agree, Mara, with one exception. You should have at least one good medic. No. Even Tilgal really couldn't help me fight this disease. If she couldn't help me, she couldn't protect our child. That's going to be my job. Other things could go wrong. She silenced him with a glare. He frowned, then nodded solemnly. And you can get that out of your mind too, she snapped. I am not going to lie down and keep watch on my symptoms, waiting for something to go wrong. She marveled, though, at how suddenly and how completely she wanted to protect this child that didn't even vaguely resemble a child yet. Maybe, her conscience whispered, this sudden protectiveness was like the way Luke felt about her, a love so fierce and uncontrolled that sometimes it threatened the beloved's independence. Maybe there was no such thing as real independence, not with contentment. This child, though, could already be under the influence of Yuuzhan Vong biotechnology. A child was not an it. He could die before he ever saw daylight. He could deform in 1,000 deadly ways. He could... Are you all right? Luke's hands caressed her shoulders. Mara, we should at least have Ciliel do a few basic tests. No, she muttered. No one, Luke. Not Leia, not the Solo kids. Just how do you expect to keep this from Anakin? He demanded. She laughed shortly. The last thing a boy his age even considers is an old woman getting pregnant. Keep a lid on your feelings and he won't suspect. He does expect me to be concerned for you. Then I'm sure you won't disappoint. Luke exhaled slowly and she felt some of the tension leave him. You're right, he said. There are people who would pin hopes on this child that maybe they shouldn't have. He, or she... Can you tell? Mara fell into the Force again, absorbing everything it would tell her. She had extraordinary powers to communicate with certain people. She'd been able to sense Palpatine from anywhere in the galaxy. So far, though, this sense was utterly primitive. Caressing the life signature, she felt again those faint echoes of her own savor in the Force and Luke's. A new thought distracted her. Her mind worked backwards, counting days, wondering, when? She half smiled and answered Luke's question. No, I can't tell, but I don't want to say it. Then, for now, he, Mara said firmly, though she honestly couldn't tell. Then she finished the sentence he'd interrupted with his own question. If he survives, he could be truly great, or greatly evil, or, she added grimly, greatly damaged by this disease. I won't let that happen, Luke. I swear. This is my child, too. He seized her other hand. Mara, you're going to have to make an allowance for that. If I get protective, please don't take it personally. You'd better not, she growled. Then she folded around Luke, embracing his shoulders. He struggled up off his knees, then pulled her to her feet. His arms tightened around her back and her waist, his lips pressed hard against her mouth. His breath tasted sweet and musky, and at the back of her mind she could feel him rejoicing.